and we'll start with Emad Kiyaei, my colleague in the METO organization. The METO organization is the Middle East Treaty Organization. Emad is one of the founders and a member of the core team. He holds a master's of International Affairs from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. He's a principal at the international consulting firm IDG Group. He's the co-author of a book that is about to publish about the WMD free zone in the Middle East. And he contributes to many other articles, books, and gives many, many interviews around the world about the region and about Iran. Emad.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you to Abolition 2000 for the invitation. It's great to be here. As Sharon got us started, the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or Iran nuclear deal, was such a refreshing development when it occurred in July of 2015. Now, the discussions over Iran's nuclear program date back way before that, and in earnest in 2003 onwards, when Iran was able to enrich uranium, the file, the dossier of Iran's nuclear file came to international attention. And fast forward, once President Rouhani replaced the more sort of outspoken and possibly very damaging Iranian President Ahmadinejad, Rouhani came with a new sort of agenda and platform to engage the international community over Iran's nuclear program. And these negotiations began, that was really intense in September 2013. And then after 2 years, in July of 2015, they reached an agreement. Now, that agreement from the beginning was aimed at a specific end game, where the international community sought for Iran to not develop nuclear weapons. And for Iran, it was to showcase that it has the rights to enrichment and for a peaceful nuclear program, and at the same time to remove draconian sanctions that were placed on the country. Those sanctions were in 3 levels, from the UN Security Council sanctions, which are global in nature, to unilateral sanctions by the United States, and other ones from the European Union. So Iran's emphasis was, at the end of these negotiations, Iran has its nuclear program that is under international supervision, inspection by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, to ensure to the international community that it doesn't want to have a nuclear weapon. And through these negotiations, the international community asked Iran that it will take specific steps so that the world can verify that Iran is not cheating, and close doors to 2 major pathways to a nuclear weapon. And that's highly enriched uranium, that is necessary for weaponization, and the plutonium track, which is used as a byproduct of nuclear waste from heavy water reactors. Now, the deal provided that 24 hours monitoring, inspections of uranium facilities. It limited Iran's enrichment levels and sort of like facilities. It closed all of those doors. And it did lead to the UN Security Council removing the sanctions, the EU removing the sanctions, and the United States, under Obama administration, removing nuclear-related sanctions on Iran. So it was fantastic. But the Iranians and the world powers, which was the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus Germany, saw these negotiations as a beginning of a much broader engagement with Iran. Iran and the world, specifically with the United States, has a long list of issues that they would like to hammer out and iron out. And one of them was the nuclear file. And the Iranian government, through these negotiations, sought it as a gateway to broaden eventually discussions to other issues that are now again in the forefront of the matters in the Middle East. May it be regional security, maybe Iran's support for non-state actors, or others may call them terrorists, some people will call them freedom fighters, whatever you want to, whichever side of the fence you are, but Iran's engagement with these actors in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon and Yemen, and throughout the Middle East. So to deal with these other issues, there was a hope that by achieving the Iran nuclear deal, then we can go on to these other items on the list. Unfortunately, it was a very short-lived victory for those in the international community that believed in multilateralism, believed in diplomacy, and an end to coercive policies that were not giving any results. Instead, Iran, under heavy sanctions during Ahmadinejad, enriched further levels. It expanded its nuclear program. So it had a reversal effect on the specific target of Iran's nuclear program to be dismantled, instead expanded. So we know now that multilateralism in this case worked. And not just that, something very important also occurred. Non-proliferation, as we are well aware of in this group of people in this webinar, has had many loopholes for a long time since the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty came into existence. And so this nuclear negotiations in earnest had political will, had a lot of drivers behind it to succeed. And in doing so, they closed off many loopholes within the International Non-Proliferation Treaty that would have allowed countries such as Iran to find ways around the system. So the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, is not just useful in the case of Iran, but it's a blueprint of how we can strengthen nuclear non-proliferation on a global level. And so it is a double sort of added bonus that it's resolved a major international issue over Iran's nuclear program, but also provided an avenue to strengthen global non-proliferation. Unfortunately, with the presidency of Trump, we have seen President Trump reversing every major multilateral agreement that was done under the Obama administration. It goes way beyond just the Iran nuclear deal. It deals with the intermediate range nuclear forces agreement that was between Russia and the United States. It includes the climate change agreement of the Paris agreements, trade agreements with the EU, with China now, and with closer to home, Mexico and Canada. So we have seen the destruction of multilateralism and international order and law that for many years allowed us to somehow get to agreements without the use of force. Now, that being said, what has happened? Since May 2018, President Trump unilaterally removed the United States from this multilateral deal, the Iran nuclear deal. That triggered a series of events. By pulling out of the deal, it took a major pillar or leg of this agreement. Being the United States has a profoundly important role in terms of international arena and its influence. Even though it was a unilateral decision and reinforcing US unilateral sanctions on Iran, the United States new administration used its weight to put pressure on other countries to make sure that Iran remains isolated, that these unilateral sanctions from the United States go beyond the borders of the United States and influence major trading partners of Iran, and specifically the Europeans. And here, the European Union, even though is in support of the Iran nuclear deal, and it still remains a signatory to the agreement, has done very little tangible, on the ground, practical work on making sure that the incentives Iran agreed to under the agreement. So their end of the bargain was, you can come and check our nuclear program, but in return, we need some of this, we need these sanctions out, and we need to re-engage economically and politically and socially with the world. So here, the pressure of the United States on their European partners has made the sustainability and the probability of the survival of the nuclear deal come into jeopardy. As we speak today, the Iran nuclear deal is on life support. And as time goes by, Iran, regrettably, has no other option but to also react to this sort of slow movement or slow death of this Iran nuclear deal. So Iran has taken steps to revamp its nuclear program, has taken steps to increase enrichment a little bit further, has increased its stockpile of uranium and so forth, which of course is not necessarily constructive. But here we are now in a stalemate of like, how do we move forward from this sort of situation? And here I would like to just make 2 or 3 comments and then hopefully hear from the other speakers and then open it up later on to questions and answers. Where we are now is not just a question of Iran nuclear deal, it's about the future of multilateralism. The international community has to make a decision. Do they let this nuclear deal falter, and in doing so, power those individuals in the Trump administration and President Trump himself that are in reality bullying on the international arena other countries to move away from multilateralism and abide by unilateralism? In an emerging power multipolar world, this is not going to be a benefit to the international community. So the world has to make a decision which direction it wants to go. And will it stand up to, let's say, a very powerful country such as the United States? Number 2, it may actually then, if Iran decides that there's no end game here and there's nothing way out, Iran may make a decision for its own national security and for its own calculations that remaining within the JCPOA Iran deal is no longer viable or beneficial. And here, the dismantlement from an Iranian pulling out will completely collapse this deal and may lead to a huge proliferation risk, not just by Iran re-engaging in its nuclear program, but within a very volatile region, leading other countries, specifically Saudi Arabia and UAE and others, to accelerate their own domestic nuclear programs. And of course, here we have Israel, which is a completely different case, which I hope we have time to address as well. Number 3, the nuclear deal was supposed to be, again, a gateway to a much broader discussion on regional security and other matters. Now, the fact that the Iranian nuclear deal collapses, it closes the door from an Iranian government perspective to engage the international community on these key other matters. So here we have a possibility of these major front lines that have been fought out, proxy wars, sectarian issues, instability that we constantly are seeing from the attacks on Aramco in Saudi Arabia or the attacks in the Strait of Hormuz to the quagmire that we're facing in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, and in Libya, worsening, whereby Iran then plays out its security sort of calculations through its proxies by making the region engulf further, deeper into conflict. So it's a lose-lose situation at the moment. I hope that we will have some more optimism by the end of this webinar, but I would like to just bring us to a reality check of, unfortunately, the challenges that we're facing at the moment. I will stop there. Thank you so much.